to the fourth iteration of our salon at 30 Carver Street. Chris is a spiritual advisor and counselor to the Buddhist students at the Divinity School.
Thank you.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vaishya Guruvaya Durya Praparataya Tatakatya Hate Samyaksham Buddhiyate Ata Om Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Bekanze Rajaya Samugate Zoha. Lincoln asked me maybe 10 minutes ago, how did I get interested in Buddhist chanting? And I hadn't thought that I would talk about this until he asked me that question. But it is an interesting kind of context for me how these things arose. Now, I've been a Buddhist practitioner for close to 20 years. I'm considered a lay teacher in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. I facilitate meditation groups and also teach at Harvard Divinity School. So many of the courses I teach are involving Buddhism in one way or another around chaplaincy, end-of-life caregiving, counseling. Now, if I go back before that, however, I was a chaplain at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. For about 5 years, a full-time chaplain. And one of the things I did there very often was meditation with patients, as well as staff and physicians, social workers, but also with people at the end of life. And I would occasionally get the question, do you know any kind of chanting I could do? Because when I meditate, all of my anxieties come up, and I don't feel safe, especially if I'm in the hospital. What would you recommend? And occasionally I would get asked, do you know the Medicine Buddha mantra? And I kind of knew it a little bit. I had never spent a lot of time doing chanting. With some teachers, we had done some chanting, but it wasn't something I'd invested a lot of effort into. But I began to dive into the world of chanting and mantra in Buddhism, could begin to see how it might benefit people. So it's been quite a road of several years. So the Medicine Buddha mantra is probably a nice place to begin talking about the significance of chanting. And some of you may know the origins of a lot of the Sanskrit chants and mantras come all the way back into the Vedic period, around hymns. Hymns that were sung to maintain the cosmos. So there was this process of, or rather a belief that in order to propitiate the deities, you had to sing and chant these hymns just right. And so this was, part of that was, a lot of the texts that we now know about that were handed down orally from the Vedic period, and then into the Upanishadic period much later. At that point, the chanting went from the outer sacrifice, so it was also part of pujas and sacrificial ceremonies, burning soma leaves and other things. During the Upanishadic period, somewhere around, we're not sure, but probably somewhere around like 800 to 600 BCE. Some people think it maybe goes back 1,000 to 2,000 BCE, but largely it became about the inner sacrifice. So the task moved inward. And so the chanting became a couple of things, and this is also true then as Buddhism began to sprout. A way to focus the mind, to protect the mind, to guide one's intentions into right practice, but also to preserve lineages, to preserve the oral texts. And so this practice of Medicine Buddha came along then later as Buddhism began to adopt some of the earlier deities into the forms that we know now. So Medicine Buddha in Sanskrit, his name is Vaishyaje. In Tibetan pronunciation is Bekanze. What Bekanze or Vaishyaje represents is the quality of healing that arises through wisdom and compassion. So in Buddhism, everything is wisdom and compassion, inseparable. Largely they're indivisible, but you see this constantly. And so the chanting here is not just about curing illness, although it is used for that. And there's a whole sadhana that goes along with that. A whole practice. Sadhana is Sanskrit for spiritual practice. And that practice focuses on chanting as well as visualization, meditation, texts, recitation, invocation. The mantra has a protective element to it that often you can translate the term mantra, man being mind, as mind protection, as a way to engage with mind through an instrument for liberating the mind. Okay? So mantra becomes a tool, if you will. I don't know if you can see me standing in the way here.
Yeah.
Mantra becomes a tool, ultimately, for liberating the mind through chanting. So how does this all work? That's one of the questions. Going back to the earliest chanting and mantra that we know about, sound has a primordial place in the cosmos. And so when we chant a mantra, we are actually thought to be invoking these primordial syllables and sounds. So we're actually, it's almost like we're attuning ourselves, we're plugging in. Right? And so these sacred syllables, some of you may have heard the syllable Om. In Buddhism, a big syllable is Ah, A-H, which signifies emptiness, non-duality. So Hum is another syllable. We'll look at this a little bit later. Hum is the syllable for the heart, for compassion. So there's one of the earliest Buddhist mantras is Om Ah Hum. Has anybody heard this chant? If you will, spiritual power in reciting a mantra. In Mahayana Buddhism, that is the greater vehicle of Buddhism that you find in Tibet and in East Asia and China and places like Japan, although like the Pure Land Buddhist, focuses on devotion. Devotion to specific Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. And so basically what's happening here is, so it could easily be taken that what we're doing when we chant devotionally to a deity is that we are actually invoking a real entity, a real being. But in actual fact, what we are doing is invoking the qualities that they embody.
Other than the sound, what separates that from meditation? Because it seems as if you, as you invoke the sound and your mind, as you said, you're focusing on breathing, which is very much a part of meditation.
Right.
Are they not very similar? I was told, in fact, when I bought these tankas here, that they were used by people to meditate
Right.
in front of.
That's a good question. And like the tankas, mantras serve as a window, as a doorway in to your meditation practice. They seem to be part of conventional forms that we use in order to access ultimate formlessness. So in Buddhism, often you will have this distinction between skillful use of the relative world that helps us in an embodied way rely on images, on sacred, on relics, if you will, mantra as well, as a way to access more and more subtle states of awareness. But without those initial conventional supports, it would be hard to practice that gradual process of relinquishing concepts and forms that keep us rooted in the world. So at some point we let go of the raft here being the actual tradition itself that carries us from one shore to the other. And the raft is seen to be a conventional form. Religion itself is seen to be in the realm of the conventional, because the ultimate state is formless. And so we're relinquishing the traditions in many ways, the forms of the traditions. So one very popular Buddhist chant is the chant to Avalokiteshvara, who is the Bodhisattva of compassion. So he's a Bodhisattva. He's not seen to be a Buddha, but a Bodhisattva who deeply embodies boundless and unconditional compassion for all beings everywhere. Tara actually has 21 forms, many of them associated with a color. There's, as I said earlier, there's white Tara, black Tara, orange, I think, red Tara. I believe that's Karukala is the name for red Tara. It's more of a wrathful form. But ultimately, Tara is the female form of Avalokiteshvara. She embodies the feminine aspect of compassion that is born. So the myth is that she comes into being because of the merciful aspect of Avalokiteshvara's tears. That green Tara comes out of the tears that Avalokiteshvara cries for us. The Tara practice is very much the same. We visualize her in front of us. The mantra invokes those qualities. It helps to attune us into the attention and the empowerment that comes with the mantra. Manjushri is often depicted with, it's a sword. What's he use a sword for? Why on earth would a Buddha have a sword?
To kill ignorance.
Yes. The sword represents the sharp, absolutely uncompromising nature of clear seeing of truth, of wisdom. So he is the...
We need him today.
We sure do. I think we need all of them personally. Once more. Breathing deeply, we'll do it one more time, but silently hearing that tone in our mind.